The reason I'm talking to so many giant company founders these days, all those founders are wildly optimistic about what's going to happen in the next 4 years. Why? Because at the very least, it's do no harm. At the very least, this administration is not going to come in and start upending every ridiculous table they can find. They're not going to come in and start talking about how business needs to be punished for its success. Pay your fair share. They're not going to talk about how unionization, for example, is the cure for what ails America's economic situation. They're not going to talk about how regulation is going to fix everything. And that's not what this administration is about. So you can look forward to a more robust economy under President Trump. On foreign policy, you can look forward to solidification of foreign policy. Joe Biden is the worst foreign policy president in my lifetime, which is an amazing thing to say considering there's a man named Barack Obama who exists. Joe Biden has been a horror show on foreign policy. And as I've talked about, there is a Trump doctrine, and the Trump doctrine is basically FAFO. The Trump doctrine is American citizens come first, America comes first, which should be obvious, but American citizens do have interests in what happens abroad. So, for example, the freedom of the seas, the freedom of the Taiwan Strait or the Malacca Strait, so that, the free flow of goods can actually allow us to receive goods, products, and services in an affordable way. The United States has an interest in the free flow of energy and oil, which is why we're interested in, say, Saudi Arabia, and also in drilling domestically. The United States has an interest in curbing the regional ambitions of Iran, which is responsible for killing a vast bevy of American soldiers abroad, as well as targeting America's allies everywhere from the Middle East to Europe to South America. We have an interest in containing China, the American public. Perhaps China most of all, because China is not only stealing our intellectual property, China is not only threatening Taiwan, which is the source of all the semiconductors that are useful in sophisticated technology. China is not only threatening all of those various shipping channels that I mentioned earlier. China is also shipping the precursors for fentanyl into Mexico, and Mexico is then shipping those over the border via the drug cartels. There are all sorts of foreign interests that Americans have, which brings us to the second point about Donald Trump's foreign policy, which is we should calibrate our action to the level of interest the American public has in the thing. So if a bad thing is happening in some far-off land that's really bad, and if we can do something minor to help that, great. But if it requires a serious commitment, it better be a serious matter to the American public. And everybody ought to do their part. So when it comes to Ukraine, when President Trump comes in and says NATO members need to pay their fair share, he is correct about that, and he always was correct about that. And then finally, if the United States is going to actually use force, we should use force in the most effective possible way. The first sin in war is losing, and Donald Trump is not a loser. He will use the credible threat of force to actually get things done. You can already see the world beginning to reshape around Donald Trump's foreign policy. And finally, Donald Trump is going to get us back to some sense of normalcy. The Democrats have decided that they're going to ride or die on the principle that the American family is somehow bad, that the American family is somehow a repressive institution. Churches are oppressive institutions. And basically, we should all think of ourselves as freewheeling, atomistic individuals that are bundles of sexual desires. And if those sexual desires can be pleased on a momentary basis, well, then that's where true happiness comes from. That is not the vision of happiness that the American dream promises. You can see this, by the way, in the contrast between what Democrats think is weird and what Republicans think is weird. Republicans think drag queen story hour is weird. Why? Because it's freaking weird. Democrats think J.D. Vance is weird because he has a wife and kids, grew up in bad circumstances, and made something of himself after serving in the military, and then is vice president-elect at the ripe old age of 39. They think that guy's weird. Normalcy is returning. These are important conversations, but here's the thing. When you're having an important conversation, you need excellent phone coverage. You see what I did there? There's no shortage of flashy ads from the big wireless carriers offering the latest iPhone for free, but look a little deeper and you'll quickly realize what that actually means. To qualify, you need to trade in your phone. Not just any phone, but one valued at $1,000. Then you're required to sign up for their $100 a month unlimited plan and pay that sneaky $35 activation fee on top of it all. That is a lot of money for something they're calling free. Don't fall for their marketing tricks. PureTalk, my cell phone company, has a much better option. Get a brand new iPhone 14. That comes with all the bells and whistles you actually need. Plus, get unlimited talk, text, a generous 15 gigs of high-speed data, and mobile hotspot capability, all for just $50 a month. How about that? You're paying half the price of what the big guys charge, and you still get a new iPhone powered by America's most dependable 5G network. Do this. Head on over to puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Switching is simple. Plus, when you go to puretalk.com/Shapiro, you'll get an additional 50% off your very first month of coverage. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro for an additional 50% off your very first month. PureTalk is America's wireless company. Go check them out right now at puretalk.com/Shapiro. And I'm very optimistic. That optimism rests on efficacy. Donald Trump is coming into office with some obstacles too. Going into the next year, this is really important. Donald Trump is not just coming in as, the singular dictator who can determine exactly what he wants to do. Everything that we love about the American government is also the thing that makes it hard to get things done in the American government. When a Democrat like Joe Biden is in charge, you are very happy about the checks and balances. And when a Republican is in charge, Republicans get frustrated with the checks and balances. That's perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural. It's also why the checks and balances exist. Right now, Donald Trump is going to enter office with, effectively speaking, a one-vote majority in the House. That is an absolutely slim majority. I mean, that is the slimmest possible majority. He's also going to enter office with a 3-vote majority in the Senate. 4 if you're counting vote number 50 and then J.D. Vance breaking a tie. Okay, these are not large majorities. They're particularly not large majorities because there are a bunch of people who are moderate Republicans in purple districts in the House. And in the Senate, you have a few senators who are from purplish states. And so what that means is that everything that Donald Trump wants that has to be gotten done legislatively is going to require compromise. And that's going to require somebody to broker the compromise at the top level. In this case, John Thune in the Senate and Mike Johnson in the House. And so all of these sort of misplaced ire over the past 72 hours at Mike Johnson, as though Mike Johnson was just sort of freelancing and freewheeling when he came up with the Cromnibus package. That's not true. It's not true. Now, we can argue over whether Speaker of the House Johnson made too many concessions in order to get the things that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance wanted in the original bill. I would say, sure, there's some things in there that definitely should not have been in there. And frankly, I'm glad that that version of the bill went down. It had too much pork. And as I said yesterday, I think the amount of disaster relief in the bill is excessive. I think the farm subsidies are excessive. However, blaming Johnson for that is ignoring the fact that there must be coordination, heavy coordination, between Donald Trump, who establishes what he would like to get done, Mike Johnson, who establishes what can get done in the House, and outside influencers who are pointing out the discrepancy between the two. It does have to be this interplay, because otherwise what you're going to end up with is a circular firing squad. And that circular firing squad dynamic is what we've seen over the course of the past several days. Now, I'm optimistic that it's going to stop. I'm optimistic that there will be action by the House of Representatives to avoid a government shutdown. Now, why does it matter whether there's a government shutdown? Now, the truth is, it's not going to be the end of the world if there's a government shutdown. We had a 35-day government shutdown back in 2018. The world did not end. It was not particularly awful. Lost productivity was like $3 billion, supposedly. All the vital checks still went out, like Social Security. So if there were to be a government shutdown, the media would play it as though the world was ending. The world would not be ending. However, politically, it would not benefit President Trump to go into his new presidency, not only with a government shutdown, but also with having to presumably then deal with the fallout in the House. Like, that's not what you need if you're President Trump. You need a machine that's ready to go day one. That is the only focus. It should be the only focus from the Trump administration. I think now that reality is setting in, that will be the only focus from the Trump administration. Get past this thing, get to the administration, and then coordinate everything between the leadership and the Congress. Do that, and you can have an effective administration. I'll give you an example of when the circular firing squad starts. So, as we discussed yesterday, originally, the Cromnibus package, the continuing resolution, could have been done with just a 3-page bill. Just says, we're going to continue to fund the government at current levels up through January 20th or January 10th. Right? That could have been the bill. Instead, Trump, Vance, Johnson, they all wanted disaster relief provisions in the bill because of the fallout from Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, among others. And they also wanted farm subsidies in the bill because they believe that farmers have been shortchanged by the Democrats. In order to get those things, you are going to need to make concessions to Democrats because there are some Republicans who would drop off the bill based on the spending levels. In order to get those concessions, you'd have to give some concessions. And some of those concessions, I think, were frankly wrong. Other concessions, I think, were overblown. So, for example, the idea that there was a pay raise for Congress that was 74, that's not true. There's a cost of living adjustment for Congress. Is that like a major issue in American politics? I think it's a cheap demagogic issue. Do I think it's like a huge issue? Not really. Is that going to break the bank? Not particularly. As far as the Global Engagement Center, a place that we literally sued, okay, that is a State Department offshoot that engages in soft censorship. My understanding is the reason that Republicans in the House, including Speaker Johnson, were willing to sort of make that concession is the assumption was as soon as Trump entered office, Secretary of State Rubio would come in and just kill the Global Engagement Center anyway. So you can fund whatever you want. He was going to kill it anyway. Okay. With all of that said, the reality is it was not a good bill. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy pointed out all the flaws in the bill. And President Trump and J.D. Vance, who had coordinated with Johnson on the bill, they decided that they didn't want the bill after all. And so they decided to pull the bill and then suggest an alternative. So yesterday played out as total chaos in the Congress of the United States. It played out as total chaos because, again, I think that reality is being sort of gradually accepted. And the reality, as I mentioned yesterday, is that politics is a coalitional game. The Republican caucus is very fractious, and they have an incredibly narrow majority. And that means you're not going to get everything you want. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.